Hey class, Coleman Hagar here, going over our week 6 first discussion question, talking about Revelation. Um, Revelation is a book that I've read, I think, 3 times now, and all 3 times I've read it, I've been equally as confused as the first time I read it. Um, Saying that jokingly, but it is quite a confusing book to read, and it is hard to interpret. I think interpreting Revelation is so difficult because there are a lot of things that we see in Revelations that we don't see a lot in Scripture. It's a very unique book, and there isn't, I think, in the world of interpreting Scripture, we find a lot of commonality between different books. So we can use different techniques in the same book, or in different books. So let's say if I'm reading Acts, I can use some of the same techniques that I use while I'm reading the Gospels, kind of like what we talked about last week. But I think Revelation is kind of one of its own, and it's a very descriptive book that has a lot of imagery and symbolism and just a lot of very unique things that we don't see all the time in Scripture. So I think with that being said, that it being kind of an anomaly, or kind of the standout book in the Bible, that's why we haven't really been able to find the most efficient way of interpreting it. I think there are a lot of good ways, and reading the textbook and reading chapter 17, I found a lot of good ways to interpret. And I want to address the last question, before I jump into some of the biggest misinterpretations. But the best approach to reading the book of Revelations is, I think, the approach that the textbook gave us. I think that's true because you look at the book through multiple different angles, and I think the best way to interpret Scripture just in general is to look at the book through multiple angles, but especially with Revelations, because it is such a unique book and it is a very dynamic book. You have to look at it through the eyes of how the audience was interpreting it then, how we should interpret it now, reading it through the lens of, is this to happen in the future, or is this supposed to be happening now? I think going at it at as many different angles as you can, you're gonna have the best success when trying to interpret. And I think the biggest misinterpretations that people make, just in general, for the whole book, is some of the scenes we see that are very violent. I think those can be taken out of context very easily, and looked at as something that God is punishing us, or he kind of like what happens with how some people view the flood. But these violent events that take place and that are descripted, I think it's very easy to lose the heart behind why those events are happening and why God is making those events happen. So I think, like, to combat that, you look at it through the lens of how is God loving us more through this event? Using the flood for an example, like God wanted to restart, and he did that through the flood. So I think we can look at some of the events in Revelations and kind of make the same corresponding ideas with the two. So those are my thoughts on Revelation. I'm definitely going to give it another read after reading the textbook. I've had a love-hate relationship with this book because a lot of people love to read it. I am not one of those people. I find it very hard to read, and also, like I said, very confusing. But I'm going to give it another read after reading the chapter, and try to apply some of those principles that the textbook was talking about, because I think the textbook had a lot of good things to say. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Hope everybody's staying safe. Hope everybody is feeling good. So yeah, have a good one, guys.